Hi guys, and welcome to the very first episode of the Sunny Side Up podcast. Before we get into the episode, I just wanted to come on here quick and chat with you about a few notes. As you guys know, Leah and I are very new to podcasting. We are just learning, and this is a work in progress. So you might notice some things with the editing and the sound that need some improvement, and just know that we are working to develop those skills and make each episode better and better. Also, we were a little nervous with this first episode, so you might even notice that some of the interviewing styles and different things that happen during the episode are a little rough, but that also is going to improve, we're hoping, as we get more comfortable and more familiar with this type of format. And then the last note is just that as we share our personal stories, and even as others share their personal stories moving forward, there may be times, like as this episode, where we change the names of the people involved in the stories, just for a little bit of privacy for them. So you might notice that some of the names are changed, and we just wanted to make a note of that. So thank you guys so much for all of your support and for joining us on this journey. And know that we are just working our hardest to learn all of these new skills and make an episode that has really great content for you guys. So we hope you enjoy the very first episode.
Guys, we're here for our first episode.
Yes, exciting.
Sunny Side Up Pod.
Yes, very first one.
Launching today.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, by the time you watch it, it's launching today.
Yes, exactly.
So here we go.
Yes, exciting.
Oh, okay, let's get into it. We would love for you to come join our conversation today. Grab a cup of coffee, grab a broom, a vacuum.
Yep. Whatever you do when you're listening to podcasts.
That's right. Driving, whatever
Yep.
you need, crank that volume in the car and come along on this journey with us. So today we're going to ask Pam, who are you? Who is Pam Sykes?
Yes, and then next episode will be all about Leah, just kind of like a little get to know you so you know who you're chatting with henceforth. And then, so I'm the middle of three kids. I have an older sister and a younger brother. And I was raised in a small town in Canada and by my parents, great parents. They're still married to this day. So I had a pretty ideal, easy, I guess, childhood growing up. When you're little, you don't know that. You don't appreciate it.
Yeah.
I look back and I'm like, wow, my parents did a good job of keeping our life pretty idyllic. We were raised going to church. So with that, as I got older in my teen years, started going to youth group. And those fun youth group days. And I don't know about you, like what your youth group was like, but as far as relationships went, the main talking point was like, find someone who has the same beliefs as you, who believes in God, who's a Christian, and then everything will be great. Yeah. There wasn't much more in depth to that. Sure. Do you feel like you had the same experience?
Like it was very much, do not be unequally yoked, marry a believer, marry a Christian. Yeah. Better yet, marry them if they're going to Bible college. Right. The whole, that whole thing. So that very much resonates for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. So I really just adopted that belief as like the thing to do. And as I got older and was dating, I tried to fall within those parameters. And
you didn't dare look at a guy that was like not a Christian, not going to youth group.
No, right. Yeah.
That would have been the thing that's like, do not. Yeah.
Because I always too, as a kid, I was never really like a rebellious kid. I didn't really get in a lot of trouble.
Why does that not surprise
me? I know. It was a little bit like, goody two shoes. My favorite show was like Little House on the Prairie when everyone else was watching 90210.
I was watching 90210. Yeah. Kind of our personalities.
Leah and I.
There you go.
It's true. So I've never like liked drama or chaos. I've never looked for that. I've never found that enticing. So I wanted that for my life. And I was like, this is the way to do it. So I started working at a church in my early 20s. Met somebody there. For the sake of this podcast, we're going to call my husband Dan, just to keep some anonymity. Is that the right word?
Yeah, I guess so. I don't know.
Let's close it up. And so I met Dan there. We were both working there together, actually. When we first met, I was in a relationship with somebody else. He was in a relationship with someone else. Okay. We actually double dated, the four of us as couples, and hung out in like big groups together. And then we both found ourselves single at the same time after like years of knowing each other. And then we started dating. And so when we started dating, our dating was kind of like expedited because there wasn't that like getting to know you period.
Yeah, because
like,
you had known each other for years.
Yeah.
Double dates, all the things. Okay.
And like I knew his ex-girlfriends and, you know, I hadn't heard anything super alarming to that point or anything. Yeah. I had already met all his family. Like it was all of those milestones that maybe you would have in a relationship. Like
you had already done it. Been there, done that.
Yeah, for like
let's
years.
Just move on. Let's just keep tracking here.
Yeah. So we got married and I just was so excited for
when
this.
Did you get married?
So we got married in February.
Okay. What year?
That's a good question.
Oh, okay.
I can't remember.
For the sake of
I had to
the
do
podcast,
the best, but
1999.
Yeah,
just kidding.
Like, no, it was in the 2000s for sure.
Yeah.
So I think it would have been 2004.
Okay.
Yeah. So then, we were married, and I was excited. I thought like this like great life that I felt like was talked about and like promised if you checked all the boxes and did all the right things, and I was just like this like certified like goody two shoes. So I was 24.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So not overly young. I mean, and maybe today's day,
right?
You know, people are getting married a lot older. So maybe that was young, but in the Christian world, that's late.
Right.
Like Christian world, you're 19, 20 years old.
Right. Yeah.
Half the time.
Yeah. It's true.
Okay. So 24.
So I was 24 and I just felt, excited for the future. And then really like in our story, that like sort of dream of what was to be like faded quite fast.
Okay.
Really it was like our honeymoon, like I think the first or second day of our honeymoon.
Wow.
Things just took a turn really quick. At the end of our honeymoon, I just had felt like I don't even know who I was on this vacation with. I don't know this person.
Wow.
I will say in Dan's defense, he did get very sick, like food poisoning or something the first few days we were there. And he was
Cuba.
very
Must
sick.
have been Cuba.
It wasn't Cuba, so you'd think you'd be safe. But it was just, whatever, he caught some sort of bug or whatever. So he was very sick, like in the bathroom, lots of troubles happening.
Okay.
So, and even at that point, you're still kind of like, oh.
For sure.
So
you're embarrassed.
Right. Like he's embarrassed. I'm feeling bad for him. Also not really knowing what to, we're in a hotel room or not. It's not like I can make him a pot of soup or it was just really weird. And then in the moments when he was like coming out of the washroom or whatever, he was just very angry and yelling and swearing at me, which he'd never done before. So I was like, you really had no. Like he was like the opposite. This. Like he presented like this very like gentle, kind, loving person. So I thought it was the sickness. I thought he's so sick. Like he was almost like delusional kind of thing.
Yeah.
And like, I think there was at one point, I remember we got this like complimentary fruit plate in our room and he was mad at me for something. I don't even remember what. It was like all minor stuff too that he was freaking out over. And he grabbed the plate and threw it at me like across the room and it smashed. And I was just like, what is happening? So I ended up just kind of giving him his space and like spending a large part of our honeymoon by myself, like reading down by the pool or trying to. But
what else are you supposed to do? And part of you is probably like my childhood dream of, you know, every little girl waits for their wedding day and waits for their honeymoon. And here you are, you know, with a different reality than you ever saw coming.
Yeah. And to me, I didn't even realize, like I still was thinking this is just something it's a fluke, like something's happened, but we'll get back to normal. Like I just wanted to go back to normal, like the relationship I knew.
Right.
So I just wanted to leave because I wasn't even like, I'd go down to the beach and try to, but I was just like sitting there crying, like sitting on like a lounge, just crying and being like, I don't know what to do.
Yeah.
Like, and
this
then
is my life. What just happened here?
Yeah. And there was like some moments like he was feeling better near a couple days in and, you know, we try to like go to the pool or like go on an excursion and he would be like, okay, but then not. And then we get back to the room and then he'd be yelling at me. And I just...
And very out of character for him.
Very.
Like from what you were used to.
Totally. Like just this sort of like rage. And it was like irrational too. Okay. Like, you know, it's like, if I've, you know, you've caught me, you know, stealing money out of your bank account or I smash your car or something and you're angry. Okay, absolutely. Justifiable. This stuff was like, you looked at me this way I didn't like, or you didn't answer me the way I wanted. And just like very strange stuff. So I just wanted to leave. I couldn't wait for that honeymoon to be over. I just wanted to come home and like get back to normal. It truly was. Like actually it was terrible.
Wow.
but the really, I guess the sad thing is like, that just became the new normal. That wasn't because of sickness. It was just the way then it was.
Right. So reality kind of hit you in the face when you got home and you were like, this, I don't know this person. Who did I just marry?
Exactly. Okay. Yeah. And I did like very quickly, I felt almost like afraid because I was like, I made a mistake. Like, I don't actually know this person. And I guess for context for me, like the home I grew up in, like even to this day, like my dad's in his 70s, I've never ever seen my dad yell at my mom ever. I've noticed before when there's like a little tension or you can tell they're frustrated with each other, but they would often like go in their room and shut the door and like have a conversation and come out. Like us kids are never involved. We never saw it. My dad never threw things in anger. My dad never swore at my mom or even in just general. Like it just.
So you're probably a little bit like shell shocked. Like,
I was. Yeah.
What is this?
Yeah. And same even in my family, like uncles, grandparents, I'd never ever seen that. Like we had a very like peaceful family.
Okay.
So I didn't think that was normal. Like I just thought only like crazy people or like psychos or whatever would be acting that way. Right.
For sure.
So I was very scared and I didn't know what to do because I'd never seen it. So I would just freeze at the beginning and like shut down and wouldn't say anything, or I would leave the house or like try to go in a bathroom and like,
which is very much like fight, fright, or freeze, right?
Yeah.
So there's fight, there's flight, and there's freeze. And you probably did a little bit of both, right? Yeah. The freeze and then the flight. You would take off.
Totally. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I would like, and it's so sad because you learn anyone who's had experience dealing with someone who has like anger management issues, sadly you do learn how to adapt like pretty quick.
Yeah.
And you learn to just, because it's not just someone's mad, like they're on like a rage where they're like irrational. I don't even think they have control over what they're doing and saying. So then it's scary because you're there and you're just trying to like mitigate. Like I just remember always thinking like, it doesn't even matter what is who's right or wrong. You're not even thinking about that at the point. You're trying to just like calm them down. But you would never say something like calm down because that would make it worse. You're just trying to be like small and quiet and like not say anything because anything you say, anything you do makes it worse. So there's no like, you know, even I've had people since be like, you should have stood up for yourself. And I'm like, I don't think you've ever dealt with someone who has like rage problems. There's no standing up for yourself. Like that's the worst thing you can do. They will just get more mad.
Yeah.
And it just becomes dangerous because I don't even know if that person's in control of their own self. Like stuff is like in our home, it was like stuff was thrown, broken. I think our first house, every single door in our house was holes were punched in it, holes were punched in the walls. I think there was 2 or 3 windshields that were broken by either a punch or something thrown through them. Like it was just really not
a healthy environment.
Right. And then the thing that was really tricky because we both worked at a church, you know, Sunday rolls around and off you go.
Yeah.
And there's this expectation to just come in as if everything's fine.
Sure.
And partly that's on me. Like nobody told me to do that.
Of course.
So it's not like
on anyone.
No, it's just something for whatever reason, I felt like I had, like that was my responsibility to just, I don't even know why. It's sort of weird.
I mean, I think there's even memes about that in the church world. Like, you know, you get slapped by your parents on the way to church. Somebody's fighting in the car, your mom's hitting you in the back seat, and then she's up there praising the Lord. Like, and it's just, I think maybe as Christians or as, you know, faith-filled people that we just think like, okay, I just got to act as if I have it together.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot has changed over the years where there's more vulnerability in like the Christian walk or even like amongst churches. But there is that feeling to be like, I need to make sure that like no one knows what's going on behind closed doors.
Yeah.
That I think we put on ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
But then like where's the help in that, you know? But
well, and it's like the way that churches function too, like on a Sunday morning, there's no appropriate time to be real. Like I guess if you talk to a friend on the side, you could, which I didn't even really do that. So that's on me. But on a Sunday morning, what other choice you have? You're going to walk in the door and just be like, hi. Wouldn't you be like, oh my goodness, you'll never guess. Like maybe we should be doing that, but it doesn't feel like that's an appropriate thing.
And I think that's any job. Like even in the corporate world, you know, when you're now Christian, the church is different because like you got to put on a happy face. But even in the corporate world, you get in a fight with your husband, you're going to church. Yeah. Or going to work the next day, and you need to, you know,
be like professional
and pull yourself together. That's just life. Yeah. But it's, I guess, finding the balance of like, how can we be real and vulnerable, but still going about our day-to-day life.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Yeah, exactly. And I think I didn't do a good job.
You're finding any balance, probably.
Yeah, and well, because this is the thing too. Whoops, I hope that was fine. The other part that I wanted to say too is it's not like it was just like he was a raging maniac. What was confusing, and then was just like, you deserve this, whatever. This would happen, like an explosion would happen. Then once he calmed down, sometimes that was, you know, an hour or two. Sometimes it was the next day, however amount of time. Then he would come to me and he would start crying, like real tears, and be like, I'm so sorry. And I can't believe I did that. And I need you to forgive me. And I'm never going to do that again. And I've hit rock bottom. And I can't believe I treated you that way. And you don't deserve it. And I'm going to get help. And I'm not going to keep doing this. And so, and he would just say like, all I need is just for you to forgive me and just give me another chance. So then, you know, again, as a Christian, you're taught to forgive. You're taught to forgive over and over. And I just kept thinking, like, every time I really believed him. Like, I really believed him. I thought this is the last time. Yeah. He's really sorry. He's gonna change. He's crying. Yeah. There were times where he was literally like on his hands and knees in front of me, like physically begging me to forgive him and, you know, whatever. And so then I did try and put some guidelines in there. Like I enrolled him in anger management courses, and we did marriage counseling, and it was like, okay, like trying to be like, this is not okay. Yeah, this is not normal. You know, and then I find out, oh, he's been like this his whole life. He acted like this as a teen at home. He had struggled with this far before he ever met me. Okay. So I was just like, okay. So then, to at least the way my brain works, I was like, okay, almost felt like it was like a project. Like, okay, this is a struggle that he's had. Like, we all have struggles. Like, absolutely. No one's perfect. I have struggles, right? Yeah. So then I felt like, oh, this is like a for better, for worse situation. Like, this is worse than the worst I ever really thought. Yeah. But I'm going to stick by him. I'm going to forgive him. I'm going to work on this. I'm not just going to give up on him. And then too, in between that time, you would have good days that would like sustain you. So then he would be good for a couple days or a week. And I would be like, okay, like, this is better. And he would be sort of like, this is what I want. Yeah. And it would resemble like what we had dating. And then it builds this hope where you're like, okay, but then it would just always be taken away. Like very quickly. Every couple weeks, it was like something, and it was always over the smallest thing. Like literally, like if you looked at him the wrong way, or he'd ask me a question and he didn't like my answer, or the tone of voice I used, or anything. It was just like
a blow up.
Yeah. It was like irrational. So you couldn't even navigate it. And of course, like, again, like anyone who's dealt with this, you know, you try to figure it out, the triggers, and stay away from them. Like, don't say this. Don't talk about this.
I don't want to upset. Yeah,
totally. But it just, if someone truly deals with that, like anger management, there's sort of no perfect situation that you can create where they'll never get upset. Of course. Even though you think.
So how many years did this go on for? Like,
so it went on for 4 years, I guess. Like that.
And no one really knew, like your friends, like not a lot of people knew what you were dealing with behind closed doors.
Well, okay. So there was this one situation where we actually were in a Walmart. So nobody knew. Okay. I didn't tell my family or friends because I really believed he would get better, and I didn't want to shame him.
You don't want to out him. You don't want to shame him. That's your husband. You love him.
And I didn't want people to be mad at him or not like him. And then I thought, well, what if he changes? And now I've said these things, and then I can get over it and forgive, but then they can't.
They can't. Yeah.
Right? Like, I never wanted to put him in that position either. Then he comes around and it's awkward because people know this stuff about him. Absolutely. So I didn't say anything. And then we actually were in a Walmart once. I still remember exactly where we were in, like the sporting goods section. I don't know what we were looking for, but something set him off and he got so mad and he swore at me in the aisle.
In the middle of Walmart.
Yeah. And then one of the board members from our church, their wife came around the corner, like immediately. And she was like, "Hi, guys." And his face just dropped like he'd seen a ghost. I was like, and then and at that moment, it's like, where you're like, did she hear us? Like,
right.
We didn't know.
What? Yeah, you don't know.
So I'm just standing there. I didn't say anything. He kind of was like, "Oh, hey," and like tried to make some small talk. And then she did too. She didn't give any indication that she heard, and then she left.
Okay.
But then we went to the car, and he was so mad. And then he started screaming at me, "Look what you did. Look what you made me do. If she heard that, if she goes and tells her husband." And it was this whole thing that he was then angry.
As if it's your fault. For his reaction.
Because, he would always feel like that. Like, I should have done something different to not make him mad or whatever, I guess.
Yeah.
So, but we never heard anything from it. So either she didn't hear it, or she did and she didn't say anything.
Right.
Or she did and no one said anything to us. I don't know, either way. But then at that point, I think to try to get ahead of it, he was like, "Oh, let's go into the pastor. I'm going to tell him what I've been struggling with." So we had a meeting with our pastor at the time, who's not there anymore, but, and he gave a very sanitized version of what has been going on. Sort of just like, "Oh, I've been struggling with some
Dan
anger."
Did.
Yeah, okay. Dan did. Yeah. And very much like, "Oh, just struggling with some anger," kind of thing. And the pastor was like, "That's okay." Like, he was so grace-filled and forgiving. Was like, "Everyone does," and da-da-da.
Yeah.
But so it was like he was telling it, but not...
He wasn't being real. Like, he wasn't giving the full... It was like a watered-down version of what was actually happening.
Right. It was like you would have no indication of what's really going on from what he said. But I think... And then I learned this was like a pattern with him where he would say a very small portion, because then no one can ever like catch you, right? Because it's like, well, no, I admitted that.
Yeah.
I admitted I have anger, right? Yeah. So it's very smart.
And how does anyone really help you?
Right.
When you're not being fully honest?
Yeah.
It'd be one thing to, be like, I have anger issues and I need help. Or like, "Hi, I'm raging. I chuck plates at my wife."
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying you did that, but I'm just,
pins,
whatever. But, to be really authentic. So even if he goes to a pastor, a counselor, unless he's willing to lay it all bare.
Yeah.
How does somebody help you? Right. No. And so, sorry. Go on.
It's true. It's like going into like a doctor saying you have a paper cut when really you have like this like
gouge,
deep like gouge in your organs or like, right. Like it's just not, you're right. So that pastor, like he did, he's the one actually who told us to go to anger management.
Okay.
He knew about that. And then he gave us the name of like a really good counselor that we had started to see. And so we did do those things. And I do think it did help. Like I will say, like he did do the anger management courses. He completed them.
And did you notice a bit of a change?
I feel like at the beginning, because I do think too, part of him, like he wanted to change right at the beginning. Yeah. Like, I don't think he wanted to be that way. I do think he was genuinely out of control. Like even he couldn't control it.
Like he didn't even want to have these feelings. He didn't want to feel like this.
Yeah. So, but it just didn't like really stick, I guess. Maybe I'll put it that way. Like it just it was like better and then it'd get worse over time. And then we do some other kind of like course or counseling or book and then it'd be better and then it would get worse over time. So then we're at this like
2 steps forward, 3 steps back, 3 steps forward, 5 steps back.
Exactly. So it was just really hard. And like every time in between, it's the same cycle. And like now I've learned it's like a cycle of abuse, which I didn't know anything about that then, but it's like then he comes to me and he's sorry and he's crying and he needs me to forgive him. And then I forgive him. And then it's peaceful for a bit. And then something happens and then he apologizes. And it's that same cycle over and over.
Yeah.
And every time I'm thinking, this is the real thing. And also my faith, right? Like the whole time I'm just praying for God to like heal him or like make him better and believing that it would happen. There'd be like this miracle and he would change. And, but then when our daughter was 2, so we would have been married for 4 years at that time, we were on a vacation in Florida and we were staying in a hotel that had like a separate living room and then like a separate bedroom and a kitchen, like a little, almost like a condo, I guess it was more. And I was putting our daughter to sleep in the bedroom, but the bedroom just didn't have a real door. It was like a sliding door.
Yeah.
So it didn't muffle the sound. And I was like rocking her in the dark and in the quiet. So and I could hear Dan on the phone with somebody in the living room, but I couldn't make out what he was saying, but I could hear him talking. And for a while, like it was probably like 15 minutes or something.
Okay.
And then, and I didn't think anything of it. I thought, oh, he could be contacting anybody, right? And then I put our daughter in her crib or whatever and went out. And then as soon as I came out, he kind of very abruptly like hung up and put the phone down. And I thought, oh, that's weird.
Yeah.
And then I just said, like, again, not thinking anything, just out of like small, I was like, oh, who are you talking to? And he goes, oh, nobody, it was a wrong number. And I was like, oh. And then he said there was like a convenience store like on the first floor of this like condo building. So he said, oh, I'm going to go get some snacks so we can watch a movie. And he left. And he left his phone there, which I don't know if it's like a miracle because he never really is parts with his phone, but he left his phone there.
Okay.
And he left. And it was just like in a few seconds, I just dawned on me. I was like, that's so weird. Like, wrong number. He was talking for a long time. Yeah. That can't be the wrong number. So, and I'd never ever done this before. I'd never gone on his phone, never checked up on him, never. I think I was so distracted. No, I was like distracted with the anger issues. I didn't think really about the possibility of any other problems. But I picked up his phone and I pushed redial. And this other woman answered the phone and I asked her who she was and she told me her name. And then she asked who I was. And I said I was Dan's wife. And then she actually started laughing and made like a crass comment about, you know, it was not her problem if, you know, if my man has to come to her or something like that, like some sort of really rude thing. And that was the first indication I had that he also was engaging in these like inappropriate relationships with other women.
Wow. And your daughter was 2.
She was 2. Yeah. And we were on this like family vacation and I just felt sick to my stomach.
Of course.
Like I did not know what to do.
Yeah.
And so I didn't even actually say anything to him that night because also like I'm
trying to
tempering
not stir the pot.
Right. And I don't want to set him off. And
you're on a family vacation. Yeah. You're probably thinking back to your honeymoon and I'm not going there, not with a kid this time.
Exactly. That's exactly. So I was just thinking like, what am I going to do? How am I going to deal with this? So we waited. And like when we got home at a certain time, I did bring it up to him and said, you know, that night. And I told him like I pushed redial and then it's funny because he had a different reaction than I thought. I was kind of bracing for like impact. Yeah. But he actually, again, starts bawling, starts crying and crying. And admitted it. He admitted to all of it, said he was sorry, said that it was the first time that he'd ever, which now I don't believe that, but at the time I believed it. And he's, I was just curious and I'm so sorry. And he apologized. And again, like, I just need you to forgive me and I'm so sorry and I'll never do it again. And I can't believe I betrayed you and blah, 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 blah. And I did choose to forgive him, like not that quick. It took some time, but yeah, you think this is your family. I felt like we'd already been through so much. I'm like, what I'm gonna at this
leave now,
point, right?
Leave it now. Mm-hmm. And I think, you know, it is one thing for women, men, whoever, but to say, you know, if, you know, my spouse ever did A, B, or C, D, or whatever it may be, I would never forgive them. Yeah. Like I would never. But honestly, until you're in that situation, until you are the one on the other end and you have a 2-year-old and you're thinking about your family and everything, it is so easy to say you would never until you're in that person's shoes, right? Yeah. And so I feel like that is one thing that, you know, if I could say to anybody is like, don't be so quick to judge somebody for staying.
So true.
You know, just because you don't know what you don't know until you're in that position. So,
and I would agree. I would have, if you would have gave me this scenario before I was ever married and said, and I would have been like, I would never put up with that. I would never, like, I've never seen myself, because I always thought, and again, this is incorrect, but in full transparency, I always thought women who ended up in abusive relationships were like, they didn't have confidence and they came from like homes where they weren't loved or they didn't have enough hugs or whatever, right? Like they didn't have a dad in the picture. Like that also is sort of
what I real things.
Yeah. But so I didn't think I would ever be in, because I felt like fairly confident, like as confident, like obviously moments of not, but fairly confident. Like I was intelligent, I had a good home. Like it was just So yeah, I guess it was hard for me to see that that's what it was. And like when you're in it,
you're just
it
like what it actually was, which was abuse.
Right. And I never ever referred to it like that until I was like when I went to therapy. Yeah, my therapist was like, this is like abuse. And I was like, well, not really. And it's not abuse and she would over and be like, Pam, this is abuse. And I was like, oh, even after the fact, it was so hard to accept.
Because I think like, we think of abuse as like somebody hitting you or beating you or whatever. But like, there are many different forms of abuse.
Yeah.
Financial, sexual, verbal, the list goes on and on, but I think we just think, oh, well, at least he's not hitting her.
Right.
Like, at least he's not hitting her. But it's like, no, abuse is abuse.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And the thing is too, like I think it does progress because as time went on, it did become physical because that's what happens. Like someone gets mad, they're going to grab you, shove you. Like when someone's that heated right next to you, like it's that. So I do think that is a true thing when people say, oh, well, no one, it hasn't happened. It's like, well, it hasn't happened yet. But how long just yelling at you will satisfy someone with rage? Like they're going to go to the next, right? Like, So then really it was unfortunately after that discovery in Florida, it was just like every few months or a few times a year, the same thing kept happening with different women, but it was like you discover these texts that were inappropriate. Oh, this conversation he had with this person. Oh, he lied about being here and there. And all these women are coming out of the woodworks, all from different, and he never had, well, at least that I know, like an other girlfriend, like an actual relationship. It would just be these like one-off encounters,
like inappropriate relationship,
right? And maybe a couple encounters with one person, but he was never like wanted to be with them or at least it seemed like that. Who knows what he's telling them? But for me, he would come back and tell me, "Oh, I know, I love you, and I'm so sorry.
I want to be with you, but this is like
and
whatever what he's dealing with on the side."
Yeah,
like it wasn't like I want to leave you for this other woman.
Yeah, it's so then. And still, there's like the asking for the forgiveness and needing me to give him another chance. And I've hit rock bottom and this is the last time and I'm never, and you don't deserve this. And I can't believe like all these things, right? That do, it is what you want to hear in that moment. Absolutely. It does make you feel better, even though that's sort of stupid.
But it's true. It would make you feel, okay, this is the last time. Yeah. Like you want to believe that your family's going to stay intact. You want to believe that your dream from your childhood of getting married and having kids is that this is not it. So it's like you're looking for the sliver of hope. Yeah. And that's what you probably held on to was like, okay, no, I'm going to hope this is the last time. Like, this is the last time. Right. But the fact of the matter is texting multiple women or whatever, anything that takes away from your spouse and that time together.
Yeah. It's dishonest.
It's dishonest. And so I think that is something that it's important to chat about and to cover is that, like anything like that, don't sit and feel like, well, it wasn't that bad or, oh, whatever. Like, no. It doesn't matter because the fact of the matter is an emotional affair is just as bad as the sexual one.
Well, and one is always the gateway to the other,
Absolutely.
Right? Like it all starts that way. It starts with just inappropriate flirting with somebody or texting or messaging. And that's what I discovered. So you're thinking, okay, this is semi-manageable, like still hurtful, still whatever.
For sure.
But it just, again, they're never satisfied with that.
That's right.
So over time, then it is physical. It is actually an encounter with someone, a real person. It does go that next level. So you can't just if you keep tolerating what you think is just an emotional affair, just a texting, it will never stay there. Right. Or very unlikely to stay there.
And to the person who's doing it, it's like, you can't keep playing with fire and expecting not to get burned. No. Like you can't just keep toying with those little things left, right, and center.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Wow. So multiple times throughout your marriage, you're learning this is your life. So now we've got anger issues. Now we've got inappropriate
and then I think the anger issues then got worse too, because now you're mixing shame with anger. It was just a disaster, really. And it was just like the days of happy times in between were just getting fewer and fewer. And it just seemed impossible to have. And then at the same time, when I'm seeing people we know or we're going to church, everyone's telling me, oh, you're so lucky. Dan's the greatest. What a great guy. Oh, I wish I could marry someone like Dan. He's the best. And, I'm just like, okay, yeah. Like, what are you supposed to say?
Of course. Yeah.
What are you supposed to say? Like, oh, actually, if you only knew, this is the complete opposite. It's not true. Like, so then you kind of just go along with it. But then I would start to feel this guilt and shame in myself of like that I wasn't being like honest with people, but I didn't really know how. I didn't know what, I didn't know how to navigate.
Where do you start?
Right. So then it did escalate to a point after another discovery that he did enroll in a sex addiction recovery like treatment center in Colorado. It was a lot of money and time invested in that, but it was supposed to be this guy.
And this is like years later now, or like where?
Yeah. So this is years later. This is now. So if my daughter was 2 the first time I discovered that, she's now 8, maybe.
And so, you would have a second child at this point too,
as well. A second child. Yeah. Okay. And, and again, it was just hard emotionally on me because it was sold as like, this guy's the best of the best. Like he has this X amount of success rate. And if you go to him, this is for sure going to be it. And he seemed like Dan seemed always like so willing. He's excited to go because he's like,
I'm going to get better. I'm going to break this. I'm going to conquer this.
Totally. And I believed it. I was like, yes, like with God's help and Dan's willingness and this man, like, of course it's going to succeed.
Yeah.
And so, we went, completed that program, and it was again like for a few months after it did seem better. And he would even say things like, oh, I'm going to use this as like a ministry and I'm going to travel the world talking about this and sharing with other men. And I don't know how quickly it started, but then, sometime down the road, it was definitely less than a year. I think, I was on the computer one day checking email and he was at work, supposedly. And I saw a Facebook message come from a woman saying something like, I just got to the hotel now. Where are you? He messaged her back right away saying, I just pulled in now. And, you can see that on all the Apple products are connected or whatever. So I did call him and asked him to just think of his kids and leave. I didn't even say, I couldn't even get it out.
What do you say?
And he didn't know I could see it. So then he was telling me, oh, you're crazy. I'm, what are you talking about? He said he had to like hurt his back or something. So
he's still lying even in this moment.
Yeah.
And you're seeing these messages come through.
Yeah.
And so you're knowing like this is a lie.
Yeah. And I feel like that was hard for me too, because I always found everything out after the fact, and who knows, I'm sure the details were skewed even then and like lessened or whatever, like candy coated, but it was different, like sitting there and it's like her profile. I can see her. I know what she looks like. I see her name. It's happening in real time. And I hear him getting angry at me, telling me I'm a psychopath and that I'm crazy and that he's not doing anything. Wow. While he's messaging her, she's saying something like, what's taking so long? And he says to her, sorry, my wife just called. I'm just trying to get her off the phone. So she then obviously knew that he was married. Wow. And then they had some other exchanges that went on between the two of them. And
what's going through your head in this moment? Like what?
I honestly, it's almost like panic. Like I just to me, I just wanted to stop whatever bad decision because I'm thinking, don't do this. Like, don't throw your family away. All this hard work. Like, we just went to this rehab. Like, we've done all this counseling. Don't do this. Like, so then I had actually screenshotted most of the messages, and then his best friend at the time was a pastor, and I just basically, I did not know what to do. And I was so tired by that point too. Like, I was so exhausted from this constant like trying to deal with these issues that came up. And so I just texted him and I basically just said, this is happening right now. I don't know what to do. Can you please deal with this? Like, can you please go get him? And he was really great and said like, sure. Yeah, no problem. Kind of dropped everything, went and got him. And then, well, obviously, I guess too, because we had it all like in writing, but he admitted to it all. He admitted what he was doing. And he said, oh, it wasn't what you think. I went there to end things with her. But I'm like, that's not really what I want to hear.
Yeah, you're like, I don't want to hear that at all.
Like, end things with her. For who is she and how long and what? Like, what?
I'm sure the questions were just like going through your head.
Like, all this time I thought he was better after this rehab. And then and to this day, I still don't know how long that, which it doesn't matter. So then they tried to kind of like, his best friend and his wife tried to help him, and he stayed with them for a while and tried to kind of rehab him and whatever, but he just wouldn't take to it, I guess, right? Where they kind of came to me at a point and they were like, we've tried, but like, he's not, like, he has to want it. He has to want it.
You have to want it.
And you can't just say it. You can't just say like, oh, and then you're like missing at night and sneaking out and no one knows where he is. And like, then they're experiencing the things that I experienced, right?
Yeah.
So, so then that was kind of the official like separation for us. And then even then it was like, he's saying, I'm gonna prove to you, just give me a year.
So you separated at this point. Mm-hmm. Why? Like, was it him? Was it you? Was it what brought you? Well, obviously there's a million things that brought you to that point.
Totally.
Million things, but what brought you to that final like breaking point that now you're separated? Was it just like, that was it? It was like the straw that broke the camel's back. I can't do this anymore.
So yes and no. I was trying to use the tools that we'd learned in his counseling at the rehab clinic, where what the counselor at the rehab actually said was, if this happens, like now that you've had counseling and therapy and this and this and that, there's no excuse. Like there's no,
you have all the tools.
Yeah. They do like a psych evaluation on you. Like it was super in depth, like they get to your childhood trauma. Wow. And he just said like, if this happens again, like he said to me, you leave, like this is done. The marriage is over. If he does this again, this will never end and you leave. And he even told Dan the same thing. Like, you do this again, she leaves. Of course, at the time, Dan's like, of course, I that's right. Of course, like I'm not going to, and da-da-da. So to me, like I still was, I guess, too chicken to do it. So it was like a compromise to me. Like I tried to like put my foot down like the counselor had said.
Right. But not fully down. You're kind of like half down?
It was like, well, like, so we'll separate. And then he went to a different counselor that was more local. And that counselor said, you guys need to be apart for a year. He needs to take a year to just focus on himself, work out whatever is going on, do his own therapy. Because he said, this isn't a marriage problem.
Yeah.
Like he has a problem with fidelity, with anger, whatever, that has existed before he ever knew you and would exist if he got in a different relationship with someone else, because and so he needs time to work on that and to heal from that. And I understood that. Even though that was hard, I was like, okay, that makes sense to me. And so he said to both of us, you need to separate for a year, and there needs to be 1 full year of no incidences happening, no violence, no swearing, no other women for 1 full year. And then you talk about reconciling. And I was like, okay. Pardon me. I was like, a year. Like that sounded like forever.
Yeah.
But also I was just like, okay,
whatever
like
it takes.
That seems like the next step we need to do. And I understand.
So what else are you going to do at this point?
Totally. And Dan too was like excited, but was like, I'm going to do it and I'm going to prove to you, and this is over, and this is the wake up call I needed, and all these things. And I'm going to fight for my family. I'm going to fight for my family. He kept saying that. And I was like, okay, well, here we go. But so we had separated in June, and then in August, at the end of August, I had a work conference in the States, and the kids stayed with my parents. And so that would have been only June, July, August, not even 3 full months. And when I came back, I discovered that something had happened with somebody, again, a cleaning lady at the house. And so, I mean, it didn't even really last that long. And then it was just the same thing. Then after, it was just like, I'm getting Facebook messages from women. I'm getting like somebody from our church pulling me aside being like, hey, like, do you know that your husband has a profile on Tinder? Like, just like using his real picture and real name. It was like, wow. I don't like, it was just crazy. Like it was just out of control, and I didn't, and I have
nothing's
these
helping
2 kids
at this point.
Yeah. Like I think my son was in grade 1 at the time, and my daughter would have been grade 3 then. So I have these kids that I have to, and they want to know like, where's dad and when's he coming home and what's going on, and
to try to explain it to kids.
Yeah, and you have to try to be. You can't just fall apart because
you gotta pull it together.
Then they have nobody. Yeah. Like their dad's not able to be in the home and be stable and whatever, and so
you're the only stability that they have,
which probably in a way is like God's grace, because then you can't. Well, the same. You can't fall apart.
Yeah,
like you cannot, because you don't have a choice.
You have no choice,
and so you just have to kind of figure it out. And so then we just try to keep waiting. It was the same cycle of like apologizing. Something comes out, apologizing, over that time. And I think about a year had passed, maybe a little more, and then he's still coming over, still telling me how good he's doing, telling me I haven't done anything, I haven't been with anyone. At that time, people were sending me messages that didn't even know me, like, hey, just thought you should know this and this and that with your husband. I didn't tell him that because I just thought, what's the point? And I don't want to have an argument. Yeah. It doesn't matter. I just need to know, because then in my head it'd be like, okay, well, day one, now we're starting from now.
Yeah.
And then it's like a few weeks or a month, and then I heard something else. Oh, we reset the clock. Yeah. Like
we're doing the 1 year, right? Like that was in your head from the counselor. Like totally. 1 year.
Yeah.
You need to figure out your stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
And every time I'm resetting the clock. Totally. Like you're not in control anymore.
No. But it was just the lying too, right? Which that also counselors tell you that any sort of addict person, like they just are chronic liars. They have to, right? To maintain it. So then there was a lot of that, like dishonesty, which was so hard and frustrating. And then, then a little bit into it, he just the one day told me, oh, I actually, he had told us that it was over a March break. He told us that he was at this other rehab that he'd gone to by himself. Okay. This like retreat center.
Back to he rehab again.
Yeah. Yeah, okay. Yeah. He said, I'm going alone to be just me and God and to really work this out. I'm spending this week at this treatment center. And he FaceTimed us from there, actually showed us all around his room and whatever. And then a few weeks later, after he got home, he admitted that he actually was there. It wasn't a retreat center. He was at like a resort somewhere with another woman. Wow. And that he had just decided that he was just going to leave to be with that woman. Okay. And wasn't, in fact, trying and working on the marriage like he had been saying. So I don't know really how long he'd been seeing that woman. I'm assuming sometime, because you don't go on a trip with somebody that you don't really know. So even from her point, I doubt she would go on a trip with him if she knew him for a couple weeks, right?
That's right.
So I don't know. I don't know how long that took. And it was just, I think at that point I was so tired. Like it's like, okay, like
what do you do?
No.
So this is the first time he's saying to you, like before it was just like, I'm messaging these girls, I'm doing whatever with these girls, but I'm coming home to you. I want to work on. Mm-hmm. This is the first time he said to you, I don't want to be with you. I want to be with this person.
Well, and he said that initially. He said that day. Then he left. Right? Like, and told our daughter that she was hysterical, right? And it's just so frustrating because, like, you can leave and then I'm the one there who also, my heart is broken, but I'm trying to comfort her and make sense to her about it. And
how old was she?
So it was actually on her birthday. He was there to visit for her birthday. So she was turning, she was 12. Okay. So... But then he came back. It was the same cycle. Then he came back like the next day or the day after, again, after the kids had went to sleep. Then he said, I need to talk to you. He comes over. He's literally, I'm sitting on my couch. He's kneeling on the floor, begging me, crying. I don't even love this woman. She's nothing to me. I just used her to make you jealous. I just thought if you thought I was leaving for somebody else, you'd just not make me wait this year and you just take me back. And I don't care about her. And was saying all these awful things about her to me, like as if to prove that he didn't. And then he got his phone out and said, look, I swear to you, I'm deleting her. I'm deleting her friends. And I'm deleting.
That's so easy to do.
Right. And I'm never going to talk to her again. And I just want you. And I'm so sorry. And just take me back. And so, and then it was just a couple weeks of that, of the cycle again of him leaving, coming back, leaving, coming. And then I'm sure he's telling her the same thing, right? Like, oh, I don't want to be with my wife. Like, who knows? Because I can't see her wanting to be with a married man who's very much married. Like, it's not like he's divorced and moved on. He's married. He he told us he was at a rehab center working on himself because of all the damage that he brought in the family. And really, he's there with her. Like, that's not. So I don't know. Like, I don't know even
how
to this
messed
day.
up and twisted to literally be calling you from there, FaceTiming you.
Yeah.
As if like, yeah, I'm here. Like, that's that's a next level twisted.
Yeah.
Like, you have to be pretty sick.
Well, and it's funny because we were actually my parents were in Myrtle Beach. They go to Myrtle Beach for the winters. And we were staying, the kids and I were staying with them. And I remember, we were watching and he was giving us the room tour and like, oh, this is out my balcony. And it was beautiful, like this beautiful place. And I was like, wow, this is,
But a nice rehab,
right? But
I go check myself into there.
Totally. But, I've seen pictures of like yoga retreats and
They're
stuff.
Beautiful.
And I was like,
There's a lot of beautiful places.
And he's a guy that likes like nice things. So it didn't really surprise me that he would like maybe stay at the bougiest, like best of the best, like rehab. So
for sure.
In my head, I thought that was a possibility.
He ain't staying at no Motel 8.
Right. Totally. Right. So I was just like, okay, it wasn't that far of a stretch. And then, but I remember my mom was kind of like watching over our shoulders, like seeing it. And then when the FaceTime call was done, and my mom like doesn't say much and doesn't meddle at all, like maybe to a fault. Like she probably could maybe slap me upside the head a little more and be like, are you nuts?
Yeah.
What are you doing? But I remember her saying to me, do you really think he's at a rehab center? Do you think that's where he is? And I said to her then, I said, well, he also is someone who hates being alone. So which I thought would be weird that he'd fly halfway across the country or whatever to wherever he was, some tropical destination to be by himself there for a week. So I said to my mom when she said, do you really think he's at a rehab center? And I said to her then, I don't know. He either is at a rehab center and he really is going to change because he's taken the initiative and he's being somewhere alone by himself for a week, which would be really hard for him.
Yeah.
Or he's lying and he's there with someone else. Right. And then we were both just like, oh, you'll never know kind of thing. And then sure enough, that is what happened. He actually, it wasn't a rehab center and he was there with someone else.
Wow.
So, but yeah.
I mean, for you probably were like wanting to believe he was at the rehab center.
Totally.
Wanting to believe. Yeah. Because again, all you need is that little sliver of hope because you're like, I'm fighting for my kids. I'm fighting for this marriage. But in the back of your mind, I wonder if you knew. Like, if you really knew,
I think
the moment you would have seen that scan to be like, this does seem off, but maybe just not wanting to admit it.
Yeah.
Or to believe it.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, for sure, I think it's like deep, deep down, I always knew the odds were stacked against. Like, he probably wasn't going to give up this lifestyle and be like this family man that he kind of, we always talked about, like a family. Like, I just was like, I just want a simple life. I just want to be like
a family
at home. And I love like cooking and baking and cleaning and organizing. I just want a nice little house and I want to cook dinner every day and make crafts with my kids and volunteer at their school. And like, that's just the kind of life I want. I didn't want anything like crazy. We didn't go out and like party or go to like clubs or bars. Like, this is just not the way that I thought we were. But he seemed, when we dated, it was very much like, oh yeah, I'm like that too. But then I saw once we got married, no, he did like that. He wants to go out. He wants to be the center of attention and party with people. And he's not satisfied being at home. I think he was actually just bored. Like, I think that like a stable family life was boring to him.
Okay.
And I think maybe he did think he wanted it. Like, I don't even know. Obviously there was some lying while we were dating before we got married. But I do think, again, because especially in the church world, what would be respectable would be like a family man.
Yeah, of course.
And so I think he tried to play that part, but in his heart, he didn't really want that. He just wanted like attention and fun and like nights out, and he doesn't want to be home, like
putting his kids to bed
and then folding your kids' laundry while you're watching a show while there's like, he just doesn't want to do that.
Right.
And fair enough. Like, maybe that family life isn't for everybody. I guess I just wish he would have been honest with himself and then honest with me
before you
going into it, because it's like, you just ruin someone's whole life, right? Like by not being honest. And so, I think so. Then,
so the last call, he's away with this person. Yeah. You think he's at rehab. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Fast forward, like, what happens next?
So really it got kind of ugly because of the back and forth. And then I just mentally, emotionally was not in a good place. Like, it just really, I didn't know up from down. I didn't know what to do. I had my own instincts of how things were going bad. My kids are begging. They don't know. They want their family. I can't tell if he's lying or telling the truth. Like, it just was so messy. And then there did come a point where I just kind of stopped answering phone calls. I just couldn't text. I just couldn't I couldn't function. It was not good. It was not healthy.
Yes.
It was bad. And my sister finally just came over the one night, and he was there again, like trying to play both sides and maneuver and whatever. And she's like pretty feisty and like a don't mess with me person, which is the firstborn. Like, I've kind of always like depended on her to play that role, which maybe is not fair to her. But, and she was just like, enough of this. She just came in there like a boss. She was basically like, we're done with you. You're out of here. Yeah. I mean, she used some stronger language than that, but she basically like kicked him out of my house and followed him right to the street, make sure he got in his car, and basically said, stay away from her and don't ever come back here and don't talk to her. Wow. Leave her alone. Because she could see that he was just
dying. You were pretty much dying from the inside out.
It was just so unhealthy.
It had been enough.
And it wasn't going to get better. And I think it's easy.
This had been what, 20 years? At
so
this
14.
Point? 14?
Yeah.
Okay. So
14 years.
A long time.
Yeah.
Of the ups and downs.
Yeah. And it's like, and you probably like, because I feel like this now, like, it's so easy. You can see from the outside looking in when someone's relationship, you're like, well, that's not
for sure
healthy. But I couldn't really, like, I could see it, but I genuinely couldn't function. I don't know how to explain. I think if people have been through something like that, I couldn't determine up from down. I couldn't barely make a decision of like what I was even going to make my kids for lunch. Like, your brain is just, the grief and the betrayal and devastation is just so heavy. Like, you really can't function. And you need people to come in and almost like act on your behalf because you can't. And so then that was kind of pretty much the end of that. And then then he just pursued this relationship with this other woman, and I don't think that they're together anymore. I think a similar pattern started happening with her, and then which is very true to what the therapist said all along. Like, this is probably
him
like
issue. He needs to deal with it.
So so then and then I had faced the life that I have now of like single parenthood and just everything I thought my life would look like. It just looked the complete opposite. And just trying to like adjust and still create like stability and a nice life for my kids. But so it's just been a bit of a journey. Right. And I feel like we could get into more of the in-depth stuff as the episodes go on, because there's some topics that we could spend a whole episode talking about.
I feel like this episode could go on for 3 hours. There's so much I want to ask you about even like single motherhood and what that looks like and that journey looks like. But I feel like we need to save that for another episode. Yeah. I feel like we need to like, one episode at a time here. Yeah. I feel like the story of your life and my life.
People would be like, that's enough for one day.
It's a lot, but even going through all of that and like winding this down for today, what, you've been through hell and back. I mean, your family, your kids, your life. I mean, that's 14 years of an emotional, abusive roller coaster. But obviously we named our podcast The Sunny Side Up for a reason.
We did. Yeah.
And so there's always a sunny side. So what is one thing that you could say is a positive that came from this? What is one thing that you found even in the midst of the hell, in the midst of the turmoil? What was one sunny side?
I do feel like, and as you know too, like going through stuff like that really changes you. Yeah. And I think in a lot of ways for the better. Like, I think that there's a lot of ways that even I've looked at people through the years that has really changed, that I wouldn't have been able to make the change without going through that. I think
for sure
your compassion expands, your heart for people, and your understanding of people when they're maybe not quite acting themselves or they're going through something. Yeah. You just have this understanding because what it's like takes you right back there, and you know what that could
what that
feel like.
Yeah.
So
it's the empathy, maybe the empathy
totally
tidbit, maybe.
Yeah. And I think like in a way I can see where, and not to be like, do you have like the Christian good answer, but I genuinely feel like I can see where God has allowed some of this to be like, this is how I'm going to change your heart and refine you to be a person who is different and has a different capacity for handling like other people's pain or being supportive or even just seeing people that are in pain when maybe other people wouldn't notice, but it's like you recognize it, right? Like when you've walked it yourself, or maybe you even still have a little bit inside, you see that with somebody else, and then it's a lot easier to be a support. And so I do feel like overall, like I went through a bit of a dark season of like, I will say honestly, maybe I feel a little ashamed, but I wasn't that person who was like immediately like, it's okay, God's got me, like God's so faithful. Like those first few weeks, I like when it was over and I realized like there's no more hope. Like the hope was gone, which I think it's
was biblical, like right? That hope I was deferred like makes the heart sick.
Totally. And I was almost like chasing that hope like it was like an addiction, like it just and then once it was gone, I just, what are you left with? And then I was mad at God, like mad, because I felt like he owed it to me. I was like, I've done all these things in my life to do what you said. I didn't do this, I didn't do that. I forgave even when I didn't want to, even when it was hard, even when it made me feel disgusting and small, because I felt like just worthless, and I still forgave and I still tried to do whatever, and I wasn't perfect by any means going through that, and there's things that I did that I wish I could change too, but I just felt like, how dare you? And all I asked for was my family. That's all I prayed for.
Yeah, my family.
And you're not going to give me my family? Why?
Yeah.
Like, what kind of God does that? And I was just sort of like, no, thank you. I'm angry.
Yeah.
But then I felt guilty for being angry with God, because I also know, who am I to be angry with God? Like, when he's creator and he knows all things and he has
we see this much, right, where God sees the bigger picture.
Totally. So but I feel like even that, it's given me a deeper and more rich relationship with God, because in the end, my life doesn't look anything like I thought it would, or even like I would choose.
Right.
But
it's a beautiful life.
There's so much like joy and like sunny sides to it, right? Like, and I just can see it all the time, where I'm like, wow, God, like you still, like, you didn't forget me. You didn't forget my kids. You still bless us. You still show up and bring goodness in our life in so many ways. And it's different than what I thought it would be, but I'm not in the driver's seat here. Like I'm not in control. And it's so, that I think has been like a beautiful thing that I don't think I would, I would not have experienced that without
absolutely
going through what we went through.
So that's a sunny side.
It is. Yeah.
To, the journey that you were on, because there is beauty in it. Right. And I think that God can take that wrestling, for anyone listening that's going through any sort of hard time, whether it's, in friendship and marriage and health or whatever, like God can take the hard questions. He can take the why, like why, God allows it to happen. He sees the bigger picture. We see this much. He sees the whole thing. His ways are higher, right? Yeah. Obviously, when you're going through it, when you're going through the valley, you're like, get me out of here. I want the mountaintop, right? But the most beautiful things, the most beautiful growth actually happens in the valley.
Right.
Right. And so
it's like you want the rescue. You just want to like.
Yes. But God is gracious enough to not always give us the instant rescue, right? Sometimes that happens. Sometimes people can change overnight. Sometimes people can be healed overnight.
Yeah, there's a miracle. Yeah.
And sometimes it doesn't happen. Sometimes marriages are not restored. Sometimes people do not get healed on this side of heaven.
Yeah.
And so, it's just being like, okay, God, like help me to remain faithful and positive in any season or situation that I might be going through.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so true. And I remember like a distinct moment I still remember I was like on my bedroom floor. don't know why I was in this specific spot, but there's like a very narrow between the wall and my bed. I was like on the floor, just like sobbing, like snot, hysterical. I don't know, my kids must have been at school or something. So I'm just letting it all out, just like heaving and crying and just feeling so much despair and also feeling angry. And I was, because I was literally like yelling at God, being like, how could you? You've like let me down.
That's the state that you're in, that you're like, God, I don't feel where where's the good in this?
Right. Like, you'll never let me down. What are you talking about? Yeah. You've let me down in the biggest way possible. Like, my whole life basically is blown up here. Like, where have you been?
Where I think that's where like God is like, you know, would say to us if he was sitting here, right here in this podcast with us, you know, would be like, he gives people free choice. Yeah. Right. And it's so easy to blame God. Yeah. And blame what he could do and what he can't do. And because the fact of the matter is, yes, he could change some things. Yeah. But he also gives people free choice, right? Yeah. And Dan had free choice to change. Yeah. And it's like God gave him opportunity after opportunity to do the right thing, and he just couldn't do it. Yeah. And maybe in God's sovereignty, he's saving you from a life of...
Right. Totally. Like the life we live now. Yeah. Although it's hard in some ways, like the peace in your home and the stability. And it's true. Like I remember, like, because that's the thing. I was like crying on the floor and sort of like justifying it, being like, you know, I'm not going to sing these songs. I'm not going to sing You're Good. And just like crying, like it just had lost my mind. Yeah. And, you know, I'm always careful to say like, oh, God said this or that, because, you know, but in that moment of just despair, I was like quietly just crying for a minute. And I had this very clear thought in my head that I believe was God, like speaking to me. And the thought was, if you don't get what you want, will you still say that I'm good? I feel like I could cry like that. And it was like, and it just like settled me. Like I was like, I remember my whole like body just kind of went like, almost like an exhale. Wow. And I was just like, okay, that's true. Like I've always said, I believe God is good. I'm not getting what I want. Right. Am I still going to say that God is good?
Yeah, you're still going to.
And it was him. Like in that moment, it was like, yeah, like it, stop it.
Stop it. Like I'm here for you.
Totally. Like just stop this.
I am here. Yeah. I'm not leaving you. I'm not forsaking you, though you feel like I'm miles away. Yeah. I'm here holding you.
Totally. And I feel like it was like that day that I just left it. Like the life that I wanted, that I fought so hard for so many years, that I probably dysfunctionally grasped on to keep hold of. It was like in that moment, I was like, okay, fine. You're right. And I just let it go. And I didn't let myself think anymore that was a possibility, that I just accepted. Yeah, that Dan can make his choice. God has got me. He's still good. He's got my kids, and we're moving forward.
Yeah. So, wow. I mean, Pam, this has been an episode.
I guess I'm sorry. I really didn't think I would cry. I thought we'd be laughing at that.
I know. We usually do laugh at the bad stuff, but maybe today wasn't the day for that.
No.
Maybe today wasn't the day, but thank you for sharing your heart and your journey. And I'm sure our viewers and our listeners can get a little better insight into, you know, your journey. And that's it. This has been an amazing episode.
Yeah. Your turn's next.
My turn's next. Yeah. So here's to Sunny Side Up, episode 2. Bye.